So we're going to give a little overview of how we got here. And basically, everything started with the Race and Culture Task Force. So when there was an incident with a white policeman and a minority woman that with problems with tasers and so forth that caused quite a bit of disturbance, the mayor formed the Race and Culture Task Force. And there were about 22 people on the task force, 4 co-chairs. And the Race and Culture Task Force met for a year and a half, and they made 22 recommendations to the city. One of them that's well known is they recommended a police oversight committee. And they also recommended that the city hire a diversity officer. So the city, in fact, has hired a police monitor, and they hired Christina Brooks, who is heading up the diversity department. They made that a separate part of the department. So one of the 22 recommendations, in fact, I think it was the second, was that the city consider forming an independent redistricting commission. So what is that? We just call it an IRC. And it's basically a nonpartisan group of citizens that is entrusted with the job of drawing the district map. And so forming the boundaries of the districts where the council members, where each district is represented by a council member. And this is going to be especially important in Fort Worth because we're going from 8 to 10 council members in the 2023 election. So you could ask, why is it necessary to form an IRC? And that's because elected officials tend to draw maps that perpetuate their reelection. And they do this by packing and cracking. And so that kind of stagnates how things change in the city, how we can move forward and solve problems. So I don't know, are you all familiar with packing and cracking? Packing means taking a minority group and creating a district where they're overly represented. So they will only get one representative where perhaps they might have gotten 2 or more with a more uniform distribution. Cracking is creating districts where, say, a particular group is represented, is very dilute in each group, so they never get to choose a representative. And maybe, I think Byrick will be showing you examples of that in a little while. So if you want to avoid that, you can form an independent redistricting commission. Right now, Austin is the only city in Texas which actually has one in place. Now, what happened is there were 22 recommendations. The city manager, Mr. Cook, supported all 22 recommendations, and including the formation of the IRC. And I guess that was in the task force submitted their recommendations, I think, in December of 2018, and then in March of 2019, Mr. Cook had 3 months to come up with his recommendations, and he did. And however, the council accepted most of them, but they pushed back on the redistricting, forming an IRC. And so the city manager came back about a month later or so with a plan B. And their plan B was to form a task force which would recommend the criteria for forming the new districts but that the council, of course, with the assistance of the city administration, would have the authority to actually finalize where the boundaries occur. So this is certainly not in the spirit of the independent commission. Okay, now just to give you a few more details, the council, I mean, the city uses software to create the maps, and the city would make the software available to all citizens. Whoever, anybody wanted to create their own map, they would consider it in a series, and they would be examined in a series of open meetings. All interested parties can submit them. And however, the council retains the authority to actually draw the boundaries. Okay, so that's where it was at that point that some of us who had been following the task force or actually sat on the task force were disappointed, and we started forming our own group. We call ourselves Citizens for Independent Redistricting, and we started getting together, I don't know, maybe at the end of the summer of 2019.
Actually, it was like, wasn't it 2019, the spring
Yeah.
of 2019?
Was it the spring? I thought it was a little bit later.
Yeah.
But because we didn't really learn of this Plan B until, I would say, April or May of 2019. So it was shortly after that the people that on the task force that were really interested in independent redistricting, and a few others started to get together and meet with the idea of keeping it alive. And so we met with a few council members. We gave some talks at different citizens groups. I won't go into too much detail about that, except to say the pandemic brought our activities pretty much to a halt, cut them off. Okay, in the meantime, in the last a few months ago, the mayor and the council decided to form their task force. And the way they did that was each council member got to select one representative. So, for example, you just heard from Kent Bradshaw. He is Ann Zeta's representative, and the mayor had 3 more appointments to make to fill in the rest of the task force. And I think she appointed Lorraine Miller, who, by the way, was Jim Wright's administrative assistant when he was in the Congress. Okay, she lived in Washington for a long time, has lots of experience, and she's the chair of the task force. Okay, well, the task force met for the first time on September 17th. Byrick and I went to the task force. We gave a couple of talks afterward. I think in the letter I sent you all, I mentioned some of this in the letter that I sent you all with the invitation. And so at that first meeting, the mayor gave an introduction. Fernando Costa, he's an assistant city manager who basically has oversight over the whole process. He gave a discussion about the history of the council and the history of redistricting in Fort Worth. An assistant attorney gave an outline of the legal constraints from the Voting Act that the task force would have to consider. And finally, kind of squeezed into the end, there were a couple of folks from the software company that actually gave a demonstration of how the software works. And it's complicated, has many features. It's very powerful. So there were a couple of developments that seemed unusual that we weren't expecting. For one thing, the chair announced that with the mayor's permission, she expected that the task force was actually going to participate in the map drawing. Now, recall that their original charge was just to make recommendations about criteria. It wasn't that they would actually participate in the map drawing. And my understanding from what the chair said, Byrick and Kent, please correct me, is that the task force intends to create the maps with the council together. So that was one new development, at least for us. There was one other development, and that was that several of the task force members brought up the idea of independent redistricting. They were trying to bring it back to life. According to Fernando Costa, the council, that was a dead issue. The city had decided against it. One of the task force members said, well, suppose they showed that there really was a lot of interest in this. Could they get the council to reconsider it? And actually Costa at that point waved to Byrick and me and mentioned that we were coming out of that position. And he didn't shut the door on it, I'll put it that way. So I think that kind of brings us to where we are when we thought that the independent redistricting, the IRC was a dead issue. We met with Dana Bergdorf, who was in charge of the previous 10 years ago map making, and she really filled us in. And Byrick created this terrific video, which I don't know if you've all seen it. It's on our webpage. It's an 8-minute video that explains the history of the last round of redistricting. And we were looking at that to see ways to make it a more open process than the one that had to open it and improve it as much as we could, short of getting a truly independent process. So that's pretty much where we are now. The next meeting is scheduled for October 22nd. And at that meeting, Mr. Costa has invited someone from the Austin IRC. Pretty sure it's a fellow named TJ Costello, who's the second person in charge of that commission, the vice chair, to make a presentation explaining the approach that they take. And he also invited someone from San Antonio, where they have an entirely different process, where they seem to farm it out to a legal group that draws the maps, decides on the criteria and draws the maps. So the purpose of our meeting this evening was to review this, to get your own input and thoughts about that, and try to make plans about how we might influence the future developments. So that's pretty much my overview. Byrick, do you want to?
Okay, all right. Now I'm going to get down in some technical weeds here, but so that you don't lose heart, as Bruce just said, what we're here tonight for is, first of all, to bring everybody sort of up to speed with what we've learned over the last year and a half or more, and then make a plan for the coming week and actually beyond that, because it would be good to make some sort of showing at these meetings. At the last meeting, it was just Bruce and me. I know that Fernando's going to be there next week. And if
Fernando Flores.
have people either attending in person or they're at the Zoom meeting. You don't have to speak if you'd like to. That, you know, if you've become comfortable with that, that's fine. But just having more of a presence, and then, you know, the comfort level grows from there. Further down the line, and I'm going to describe what they did during the last redistricting cycle as far as citizen participation. There are openings for us to drive further citizen participation, either for ourselves as a group or to inspire other groups to do that. And I'll describe that as well. So we have some short-term goals as well as long-term goals. So let me then share my screen. Okay, right now the screen sharing is disabled. I'm going to need.
Should I do something here?
Yes, go ahead and enable the screen share so I can pull up some charts. And in the meantime, just to expand on what Bruce did, last winter, fall, spring, we were meeting with various city officials. We met with Ann Zeta privately. We met with Carlos Flores, another city councilman, privately. We met with Christina Brooks, who was the new diversity director. But the most illuminating conversation we had was with Dana Bergdorf, who is now an assistant city manager, but in the last redistricting cycle, she was in the planning department. And as Bruce said, she was the staffer who was carrying the ball on redistricting. So what we learned from her was that the city council actually did take inputs from citizens. And if I can take a few minutes just to go over some of what she shared with us. I'm pulling up a presentation here that I made for the last cycle. So what she told us was that, there we go. This is these are the old districts that they had from 2003 to 2013 there on the left, and these on the right are the current council districts, just for show. What she told us was that the city council actually opened up their software, the mapping software, to citizens. They actually held a series of public meetings to solicit inputs and to train citizens, just lay residents of Fort Worth, into how to use the mapping software so that they could draw their own maps and submit them as input to this redistricting process. So we're actually not starting from zero. We actually had a process in the last time where citizens actually did have inputs. Where it deviates from the independent redistricting is the level of control that the city council had. So back in 2012, citizens submitted written comments and they submitted formal plans. They drew their own maps using the mapping software. And at that point, the citizen involvement ended right there. Now, what they got was they had, and this incidentally was the very first time that the city of Fort Worth had solicited citizen inputs in the form of maps, of citizen drawn plans. They're using the same commercial software that the city contracted with. In the end, they got 9 plans submitted by various different individuals and groups. There was one plan submitted by a member of the engineering staff of the city, he was acting in his role as a private citizen. There were 2 plans from residents of the east side who just happened to be sitting members of the zoning commission, again, as private citizens. There were 3 plans submitted by Fernando Flores and the United Hispanic Council, working with a mapping consultant. There was 1 plan that came from the North Fort Worth Alliance Neighborhood Association, And there was another plan that came from an Alliance Texas real estate executive, so one from the same area. And then there was a plan that came from the Stop 6 Sunrise Edition neighborhood. So you had people from the north side and the east side and the Stop 6 area. What you didn't have, okay, I didn't show that. There was nobody who submitted a plan who lived on the south side of Fort Worth or who lived on the west side, right? So at that point, the citizens turned in their maps. The city said, thank you, goodbye. And the citizens never got any more say in this process, other than a funny thing we learned that when the city turned the citizens loose, they jumped the gun on the process, and the citizens developed their maps before the county finalized its voting precincts. So the voting precincts changed after the citizens went through all this, and a bunch of them went back to the drawing board and redid their maps. So this is a pretty solid indication of how how involved and engaged people were in doing this. And like there is the possibility of this happening again. And again, I'm not sure why this happened, why the county revised what the legislature did, but this is the process. The state legislature defines the voting districts, and then the county has the sort of a final say about the shape of voting districts. So anyway, once those inputs were given to the staff, basically to Dana, she took and incorporated their inputs and created a single integrated plan. She also took in council inputs, and there was a single liaison council member who was Zim Zimmerman, the District 3 council member and the predecessor of Brian Bird. He was the liaison between the city council and the staff, Dana basically. And that process was totally obscure. There is no knowledge of what went on, what kind of input the city council had, what Zimmerman told Dana, and Dana had no idea what was driving the choices or the changes that he was suggested. It was a totally obscure process.
But there are
anyway.
Let me interrupt just for one second. Because I think this is really a very key point. Dana, the city manager, could only interact with one council member, Mr. Zimmerman. He went and interacted with the rest of the council, and then he would come back to her with the plan, with their approved plan, and she would have no idea what went on behind the so-called closed doors, how that was arrived at, since she only met with him. But one thing that we should keep in mind, there is an Open Meetings Act. The city council members just couldn't get together in a bar by themselves and decide what to do, but they can meet in pairs. And so if they're discussing a common boundary between their districts, they could make some swaps and then submit that as a suggestion to the council, until finally the council approved of their final plan without a violation of the Open Meetings Act. They are allowed to meet in pairs, apparently, talk to each other. And you can kind of see evidence of this in certain spots in the current map. So, okay, Byrick,
Can I say something too about that? They can also talk to legal counsel, and that legal counsel it's like client lawyer privilege or whatever that's called. And so they could have been speaking with some sort of legal counsel, and that would be protected and shielded as well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let me burrow down into some of this because, like I said, there were 9 citizen plans submitted, and if you look at them closely, it's kind of interesting that you can see elements of the citizen plans that actually made it into the final plans. And let me show you district. Oh, darn it. Let me show you District 4 where Tara used to live. All right. So on the left, by the way, can you see my cursor floating around on that page? Good, good. Then I can use that as a pointer. So on the left side was the previous District 4, and this is currently Carrie Moon's district. At the time, it was Danny Scarth. And then you can see, and they're roughly the same scale on these maps. The plan in the middle was submitted by a citizen. In fact, it was submitted by a member of the zoning commission. And then the current District 4 is shown on the right. Now, what happened, you can see that the citizen plan extended the zone up north and cut this down along, oh, what is this? This is the 820. Okay, so they cut out all this region and and shortened this area here. But if you look at these boundaries, they're identical all along here, with the exception of the area just north of Heritage Trace Parkway, which the staff added in. And then they smoothed out this I-35 corridor here. See all this mess? They kind of smoothed along the I-35. That's what the staff did. But other than that, these 2 plans are identical. There was quite a change from here to there. So you can see pretty clearly that the staff took its direction from a citizen plan in this case. And this is the citizen plan and district that really most closely resembles what we've got today. What else was I going to say about that? And it just so happens that this is a district that particular citizen lives in. Now you might wonder, okay, what is it about this strange corner of Fort Worth? And incidentally, this is other communities here. This is a kind of, Watauga, North Richland Hills, Haltom City kind of take a bite out of Fort Worth. I asked Dana, what is it about this community here that bleeds into this, that creates this L-shaped district? And just looking at it, I figure all these people go shopping at the North Richland Hills Mall. That's probably the thing that the common thing that makes this district. I mean, maybe Tara can confirm that, but that's my theory. All right. So that's District 4. Let me show you a couple other districts in the background. Now, this is District 2. This is north of downtown. The old district went from just south of downtown, from around the Trinity River up past Meacham, way up to North Fort Worth Alliance. Back in 03, it was, from 2003 to 2013, it went right up to the northern city boundary. All right. And then the Fernando Flores turned in this plan, and you can see that they really cut this back and tried to include more Hispanic community members in this area. I guess at the time, this was a very sparsely populated area. Since then, it has become more populated, and it's been taken up by District 7. But if you look at the current district, this feature here is identical to the feature that made it into this district. And this area here, close to the Trinity and downtown, was taken almost directly from Fernando's map. So there are some clear commonalities between the United Hispanic Council map and the current District 2. One of the funky things that the staff did, all of the plans ended right here, observed this boundary at the Jim Wright Freeway. And the staff expanded that to try to capture some more areas, some more Hispanic voters in there. But as a consequence, and this is the thing that I've heard Dennis Shingleton, who is the District 7 council member, you see this street here? You see this line that I'm pointing at? This is Boathouse Club Road. And this street is the only link between that part of District 7 and this part of District 7. It's like it's like if there are any residents who live in the middle of Boathouse Club Road, that is a string that connects the northern part of District 7 and the southern part of District 7. And I've heard Shingleton himself complain about the fact that his district is not contiguous and continuous. And that's a pretty blatant example of it. The last thing I'll show you is the district where Bruce and I live. And actually, I think one of our Janets. This is District 3. This is on the west side, and you can see it used to end, the northern boundary was around the 30 freeway. One of the citizens turned in this plan, and you can see that much of it is identical to the current District 3, certainly on the northern boundaries and all that. There are just some differences. They took this area and moved it into District 6 down here. The staff took that area and moved it back to its historic District 3, and then rejiggered the boundaries here along what was to become the Chisholm Trail Parkway. But clearly, this District 3 took its shape from one of the citizen plans, and this citizen plan was drawn by one of the other members of the zoning commission, who actually lives on the east side, doesn't even live in this district. So this district was drawn by somebody who lives clear across town, all right? And so this is one reason why we went to the task force last time and said, hey, there are things that you can do to improve the cycle. There are lessons that you can take from the last go around. For one thing, some of the citizen plans got more weight than others. And there wasn't broad participation from the entire city or from all neighborhoods. And the city needs to do more to increase participation from neighborhoods and communities all across the entire city. They've got to do more than that. And then the other point that we noted was that the citizen involvement ended when they submitted the plans, and the citizens could do so much more. Clearly, what's demonstrated by these maps is the citizens can be entrusted with the process of doing maps because they've actually had an impact on the final maps. They've done it. So what I suggested was, and bring them into the process. Instead of having all these little independent maps for the staff to reconcile, invite them into the room so that they can hash out their differences together and appreciate what the concerns, parochial and local concerns are of other residents of their area, so that they can participate kind of like an independent redistricting commission. So that's one thing that they can do, how they can take the process from the last cycle and improve on it. And what that effectively does is it kind of moves them closer to an independent redistricting commission. And the fact is that these ideas could easily be implemented by the city manager's office. They don't actually have to have buy-in from the city council. So, we will be working on Fernando Costa and company to do some of that. So, so number one, how do you improve the process, ensure greater representation, give more weight to all of the residents, let them work out their differences together on a single integrated plan, broaden the participation. One way to broaden the participation is invite people who submitted comments. Not everybody feels like sitting down on a laptop to draw their own maps. But people who had comments who are from the broader neighborhood may have something to say. And in this case, the city staff could still be there to oversee and facilitate the citizen discussions. That was certainly a point that Dana was a firm believer in. And finally, invite a voting rights attorney in to counsel the citizens into how to do that. So those were the ideas that we presented to our, to the task force. I want to share.
Yeah, we could mention that we each have 3 minutes to cover all this.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to make a new share because this is what I plan to show to the council next week. And so I wanted to talk about, I wanted to actually zero in a bit locally. Yeah, so let me talk about the process. Now, in the last redistricting cycle, you go back a decade, a bunch of stuff came together. You had cheap, inexpensive computing and easy to use mapping software and big demographic data, all sort of coming together to create this tool that people could use. 20 years ago or back in the 90s, mapping software like this might have cost you $10,000. Okay, today you can go on Amazon and buy Maptitude for $700, and the city is letting you use it for free. But what on the one hand, and let me show you the kinds of things that can be done, let's say at the state level, to weaponize, the state and federal level, to weaponize redistricting. That still hasn't happened at the city level, but let me show you how this software works. And I will show you also the fact that the same tools in our hands has a very democratizing effect. So here is a tool that I got online. This is a tool called districtr.org that you can use for free. And I'm showing you the Tarrant County and Dallas County side by side. And what this shows is the distribution of the Hispanic voting population, shown as dots. Each dot is represented by, or each dot represents a voting precinct, a single voting precinct. The size of the dot is proportional to the population of that precinct, and the darkness of shading shows you how dense that population is. So your Hispanic voters are concentrated north of downtown in the stockyards and down here in the Seminary West area. Okay, and then you have a lot of Hispanic communities throughout Dallas County. By the same token, the Black community is largely concentrated southeast of Fort Worth and then largely south of Dallas. But to really show you, how things look, let's take a look at the distribution of white voters here. So you can see by these gray and dark dots where the white voters predominantly live, and you can see also where they don't live. Now, keep your eye on the areas where they aren't. This is U.S. Congressional District 33, whose representative is Mark Veazey. All right, and let me just toggle back and forth. All right. So this district encompasses the stockyards in Fort Worth, South Fort Worth and Seminary West, and then this area along the 121 Trinity River Boulevard, Grand Prairie out to Cockrell Hill and Love Field, and Irving and Love Field almost up to Farmers Branch. So this district is 85% minority.
It's amazing.
All right. Okay. So this, by some reckoning, I don't think you can call this a legitimate community. What it looks more like is a corral. And when you've got 85% minority, of course, you've mapped in a very safe seat for a minority representative and for a Democrat. But you've also limited the potential representation of more minorities because you could easily have created a minority opportunity district that was entirely in Tarrant County and still had enough people for a minority opportunity district in Dallas County as well.
So let me stop you right there, because that district was part of the litigation that we saw for the past 10 years. That was actually drawn, believe it or not, by voting rights attorneys. And so that specifically, I think, was drawn not by MALDEF, but the people that were arguing with MALDEF over that. Anyways, that was drawn. And the reason why that percentage is so high is because you don't want to look at the overall percentage. You want to look at the citizen voting age population. And so you're going to look at the Black voting age population, Hispanic, Latino voting age population as you go through that. But that one specifically was drawn to give, I know as far-fetched as it sounds, and I completely agree with you, it was drawn by this voting rights group.
I understand. And you know what? There is a very strong tendency, and this is especially true on the part of minorities, to self-pack. You know, it's natural to want to put more people in a district because turnout among minorities is lower than it is among white people. But this is not the only district in Texas that is anywhere from 80% minority as high as 98% minority.
Again, but that goes back to the citizen voting age population in those districts, and that's set out by not only states or legal statute, but also by Supreme Court cases. And so that is like the voting rights conundrum that we're in. And I wouldn't say that these people are trying to self-pack. There's other factors involved with that as well. Like you go back years and years of segregation and redlining and horrible problems like that. And so now it's hard to fix the problem.
Okay, I will show you that these four districts, Al Green, Joaquin Castro, Henry Cuellar, and Eddie Bernice Johnson, these are the most heavily minority areas. Each of them exceeded 80% margin of victory in the last election, and largely because they were uncontested by a Republican. They were so safe. But there is a strong correlation between the heavy minority population of a district and the people who are represented and possibly disfranchised. It is a paradox, I grant you, and there's a strong tendency on the part of voting rights people to want to do this. As time goes on, maybe this will spread out. Obviously, we are becoming more of an integrated society, but this tendency still exists. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about cracking, because I'm going to zero down to the city level momentarily. But let me show you an example of cracking. This is the most notorious example of cracking. So cracking, the idea of cracking is where you have a district and you chop it up and combine it with outlying areas to dilute the vote of a particular population. In this case, this is Travis County here and Austin in here. And there are about 5 or 6 big districts around it that reach in and take a bite out of Travis County. District 25 extends actually into Tarrant County. So it's it comes into Fort Worth down through Burleson and Waco, and it takes its little piece of Travis County. Chip Roy's area is, extends out to West Timbuktu and into both Austin and San Antonio. Lloyd Doggett's area, he's the only Democrat in this whole map. His is a spaghetti strand from Austin to San Antonio. Michael McCall's district goes to the outskirts of Houston. And Bill Flores has all these counties out here. So all of these, this stretch, this triangle from Fort Worth to San Antonio to Houston, all these districts take a bite out of this one county. And the whole purpose of that is to dilute the votes of Democrats. So now let me go back and show you, let's look at Fort Worth. This is what the distribution of minority voters were in the last two districting cycles. So back in 2000, your majority minority districts were largely confined inside the 820 loop. So this is Fort Worth proper here. Oh, yeah, unfortunately, my mouse is too sensitive. So this is the 820 loop, and you can see where most of the minority districts were located. In the last redistricting cycle, it kind of expanded. So you had more majority minority districts reaching down south and then up along what was basically Randall Mill Road and the Trinity River up this way toward DFW, all right? But there is a rule, one of the criteria that the city council used to draw its maps was that city council districts have to incorporate some area outside the 820 loop and some area inside the 820 loop. And you can see just based on this example that I showed you, where you have like pigs at the trough reaching in to break up Travis County. The same thing is kind of happening here. You are reaching in with outlying areas and breaking up the area inside the 820. And that becomes a difficult constraint to keep from breaking up minority votes down here. The work of the task force is to come up with the criteria that they are going to use to draw these districts. Let me show you those criteria now. These are the criteria that they used in the last redistricting cycle. So to draw the city council districts, they wanted them to be roughly equal in size. And I believe the national standard is plus or minus 10%, but the city used plus or minus 5%. Steph can probably correct me if I'm wrong about the 10%. They had a requirement that the Voting Rights Act be protected, although what's different now is they don't have to submit their plan to the Justice Department for review under Section 5. That was vacated by the Supreme Court a term or two ago. They want the council districts to be contiguous with voting precincts. They want to preserve neighborhoods and communities of interest as much as possible. They want the districts to conform to block groups and blocks. They want the areas to be compact and contiguous, and as I showed you, they really didn't meet that mark with District 7. They did a pretty good job with making boundaries contiguous with geographic features. And then we get to these two funky rules. There's the inside-outside Loop 820 rule, which really needs to go. The whole rationale for that was that they wanted council members to represent old parts of the city and new parts of the city so that the new areas don't feel left out. You know, there's this perception that the inside the loop are the insiders and the outside people are second-class citizens. on the other hand, you could look on it as the the people on the outside are, have money, and the people on the inside are have less so. And then there was this other funky thing, which is incumbent residence. They also called it incumbent constituent relationships. Basically, it's preserve the district for the incumbent, where the incumbent lives. And normally that is, that should not be a consideration. When you're redrawing district, the point is to represent residents, not to keep a district safe for the incumbent. The one place where this can be weaponized is when somebody with malicious intent comes and draws an incumbent out of their district, or draws a district around two incumbents in order to force one out. But there really needs to be a better way to prevent that sort of thing without explicitly saying we're going to protect the incumbent's residents. All right. So these are the criteria that the district or that the task force is wrestling with, and needs to come back to and recommend to the city council. And I will say that a couple of members, Sal Espino for one, and maybe a couple of others, I don't know, zeroed in on these two last ones, the 820 rule and the incumbent residence, as being highly suspicious and something that they wanted to target as maybe not belonging.
So that one with the inside outside loop 820. So we work with Allison Riggs. Allison Riggs was the attorney that represented the NAACP for the last 10 years, I think, for the state's litigation. And so that one criteria, because it does probably could lead to cracking of communities of interest. When I told her about this on our phone call the other day, she's like, yeah, no, that has to go. That one could very well violate the Voting Rights Act. We don't have preclearance anymore, but all of this that we're presenting now, like step one is you should evaluate where you need to draw these majority minority districts. And because I think a majority of Fort Worth and Tarrant County now is minority, that needs to be step one. So there's stuff in here that like you need to, is the task force's only job to recommend this criteria? Can they make other suggestions as well outside of the criteria? Is my question. Can they do that?
That's their official charge as it was originally formulated. But as the chair pointed out, they want to be involved, more heavily involved in the drawing process itself. But as Byrick mentioned, they jumped right on when Mr. Costa just presented these original criteria. They jumped on these points right away and said they really had to go. And it wasn't just, I think there were several of them that jumped on it.
I was at the city council meeting though, when they were talking about implementing the task force, when they shuffled aside the IRC and Mayor Price said, I like the criteria, and we have this great one where we're talking about including the, like, the suburbs with this. And it was just very patronizing almost and sickening to listen to, because they really want to do a good job of smoothing everything over and making the appearance of everything's fine and stuff like that. And I know the maps in 2011 gained pre-clearance from the Justice Department, so probably they were all fine. A lot's changed since then though, and we're really gonna have to put public pressure on them and go to bat to protect the communities of interest, because you guys on the south side of town, right there in 76104, have the most identifiable community of interest that you could protect with a voting rights district in the state of Texas, because you guys have the lowest life expectancy rate in that zip code. And it's all because of poverty. So you have a very identifiable community of interest right there in the heart of your community that you want to make sure that you protect. And so that really, really ramps up your evidence for future litigation. And so all of these points need to be brought out and presented to city council in some way.
I will tell you.
One other point is, and that is, you have to keep in mind that they're going from 8 to 10 districts.
Yeah.
So they just can't try to keep it all the same.
Well, right. And when you go from 8 to 10, it's going to be much, much harder to have inside outside the
Sure.
loop.
Right.
But the thing on that count, you know, you said that Mayor Price loved these criteria. When we sat face to face with Carlos Flores, you know, who is all for the idea of an IRC, he loves the inside outside 820. You know, I think it's maybe because, you know, maybe it's there are some well-to-do donors that he's got, you know, from the north side. I think there is a high correlation between, you know, between money in some of these
it needs to
districts.
be presented to them, though, that the way that this is right now, because it has legal implications, and that's how you have to frame it. And we can definitely put public pressure on them. I mean, it's easy because we have, not only, I sent you guys our list from the people that attended our event that we planned last September, just now during the call, so we can reach out to those folks to, you know, send letters, join the meetings, do whatever. I also have the broader Fairmaps list, and we can also pull in other community groups. I know that United Fort Worth was very interested specifically in setting up an IRC. And when I came up and met with, not Fernando, I can't
Daniel,
remember his name, Fernando.
was that Daniel, the young guy?
No, there was someone else from LULAC that Jeff Harper knows very well. And so anyways, that was one of, anyways, I know United Fort Worth really supported the IRC. So that, and I know the Poor People's Campaign there would definitely support just more transparency. We can pull in other groups is my point. And that's what Allison Riggs had recommended, was you don't want to just identify one community of interest. So, you know, on the south side of town, there might be a large Black community. You want to demonstrate that there are coalition districts, that these groups are working together in the community. Because at a certain point, that's basically what you're going to want to try to draw as a coalition district, where you have half the district is Latino, half is from the African-American Black community. And so that's what we need to work on finding, and we need to find those people to come out and provide testimony. And I think that's another thing that we need to suggest that the task force recommends is, not only do we want people drawing maps, we want city council going out and holding public input hearings in each one of these districts. I know there's only 8 right now, and they're going to increase to 10, but the least they could do is go out, and that would help draw public attention in that area. And that's what the Austin Independent Redistricting Commission does, is they go out into every single district and get that public input. There's a whole list of ideas that I have that you can extrapolate from other independent redistricting commissions to improve transparency and public participation. And I think what we need to do is just make that list of demands, write it out, and then have a letter campaign and have folks, you know, send that email and say, this is what I want. This is what we want to see.
Okay. I will say that, you know, what we've done, and this is why we're looking for more people, is that Bruce and I tag team at the end of the task force meeting. There's a period of public comments, and each citizen gets 3 minutes to talk. So Bruce and I together can make 6 minutes, and if you got 3 people, you can have 9 minutes, and if you have 4 people, you get 12 minutes. So, you know, basically us working as a team certainly helps, because there's only so much you can say in the space of 3 minutes. Just to back up, this was a heck of a lot of information. Is anybody feeling snowed or has questions? Because you know, at this point I can kind of hang back.
I've got a few questions. I'm glad you showed this slide here, because it shows that the city council and mayor do not have defined criteria yet for the redistricting. So that was one of my questions, is what is Betsy's criteria? Because she always has criteria. But is there a cost for the software? Do the citizens have to pay for that themselves?
No.
No.
But there is a learning curve with the software. So I saw the records last time they used Esri, and that software is not very straightforward to use. And so that might be another thing that we recommend. There's other software that
Well,
is publicly available that might be.
Esri is the contractor this time also. They've evidently made the deal with Esri because Esri was part of the presentation last month.
So did you find the record though where they paid it out and made that decision?
No.
I would go back and look for that. When Tracy Scott showed me how to search through the city council records. And the first ones that came up was that contract with Esri from 2011 or whenever it was.
Okay.
So we should go back and see, because if there's a way for us to suggest an easier software, then we might want to do that. The problem is Esri makes one that's it's publicly available. It's not the easiest to use though.
Well, I noticed that it had a lot of bells and whistles, like it had a whole bunch of different tests for compactness. And I don't know if it had that last time. I kind of figure they're always making improvements to software.
The representative from Esri was very proud of the power of their software.
Oh, software representatives always are proud. They have the best stuff all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I work with software a lot. So.
Hey, Stephanie, what would be your alternative software to use if not Esri?
Yeah.
I would have to go back and look, because that's always a question that we're asking as well. We've tried to get people involved with the map making process specifically, and this is at the state level, and it is incredibly difficult to do. And then when you turn around, you have people like Allison Riggs, who you think is like, your friend and ally, saying that's a really bad idea. You shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
So because of that, we've taken a step back, and we're just doing more, putting the responsibility on the state, but trying to improve transparency and public testimony in that process.
Now, I will say,
we should keep in mind though that Esri was the software they used last time, and quite a few citizens groups were able to master it well enough to construct maps. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So
The other thing I would say is, if you want to play with doing your own maps for free, you can do that now. There are online tools that you can do. Dave's Redistricting, if you go Google Dave's Redistricting, that's a pretty powerful one. And it's actually kind of fun to draw your own maps. It's like you're coloring in with your cursor, and it shows you how your demographics change as you fill things in. There's another one called districtr.org.
right.
That's kind of limited, and it's old data. You're only going to be playing with 2010 census, but at least it gets your feet wet. Because what I sort of have in mind, at some point they are going to open up this citizens process again, and we could have a role down the line of encouraging neighborhood groups, more people to do a thing like this. We could even turn in a map ourselves. You have enough people who live in the different areas, and your neighborhood, what your local concerns are. I mean, I have nothing to say about the south side or the east side, but maybe somebody who lives there would have something to say about that. So there'd be nothing to stop us from submitting a map, a well-considered map, but that's way down the line.
Being a software person, I would always recommend that you have your requirements, your criteria defined first before you do anything with maps, because you need that all down, or else you're wasting your time. And we need to be efficient, I think.
You're talking about a sort of an official thing. Well, all this will be defined, but I'm just saying, if you want to play with it after tonight or this week, there's stuff online that you can just try it out.
Okay. Well, some people may have more time.
Yeah.
So what is the exact timeline? Because I know most city councils aren't going to redistrict until probably 2012. Is that correct?
I mean, 2022.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2022. Does anyone know what that, because they laid that out in that presentation as well. Carlo, is it, I have so many names floating around my head. Who is the city manager? Fernando.
David
Enzo
Cook.
Assistant.
Costa is the guy in charge of that. Yeah, he's going to set that up.
So we should find out specifically what that timeline is, because if we get a chance, what the problem is with the state redistricting is that census data comes in and you have 2 months to get maps made, which is impossible. That means you can't include the public, you don't have a timeline set. But if we have 6 months to play around with that data, then we will have a lot of time at hand to go back and look at the census data, see where the growth in the minority communities have been, and try to draw districts accordingly to that.
Here's something I think we should consider, though. The task force has a set of objectives that were laid out by the manager. And one of them is that their preliminary report is due in December. They're supposed to have a preliminary report that's going to be made public, is my understanding.
But
So-
that's just for the redistricting criteria, right?
That's an interim. They will continue meeting into the new year, and I think
Right.
they have to wrap it up in the spring.
I was told that city council plans to draw district maps in March and have them finalized in March.
No, next year. That was original, but they won't have the census data by then.
Right.
When does the census data come out, Steph?
The problem is, and this is like still it changes every week.
I know. Right.
I'm serious right now. It's literally
Yeah.
changed just about every week. And so yesterday SCOTUS announced that they have to stop field operations. And that was, Thursday. So Trump's goal is to specifically shut down field operations and cut short the census so they can skip over basically low income people and undocumented immigrants. And so that will shift power more towards conservatives in so many different areas. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
But the question is now it's going to get kicked to Congress. Congress is going to have the last say, specifically the House. And so he can turn over that data. It's going to be up to Congress to determine if they're going to accept it or not. But that is going to open up a can of worms because you'll have to go back and redo the census in some areas and stuff like that. And so I don't know.
Right. I mean, the original reporting date was April 1st of 2021, and they're not going to meet that.
That's the goal right now. And so that's what the Supreme Court has said. And that's what the lower appeals court ruled. That, you could extend field operations, but that it was up to the I don't know. I can't remember.
Okay.
The deadline that they're trying to meet though, right now is December 31st still.
Okay. Yeah, right. I just figured, we got a reprieve by at least a year, and that this would not be finalized till, past 2023.
I thought I remembered from that city council meeting that I attended that there was they weren't talking about redrawing the maps until a year after that census data was released.
That's what they're figuring on. Yeah.
It has to be all in place for the 2023 election. That's when they go to 10 districts. So it has to be done well before that.
Just looking at your growth though, which has been in it's been mainly in the Hispanic and Latino communities. I think, but that was for Tarrant County. And so what you really need is, and this is what Allison said her legal team could probably do way after the elections, because they'll have more time to do that, is to come in and do more. There's something called the Jingles criteria that dictate when you need to draw a majority minority district. And you have to go into certain areas and look at if there is a history in the community of racially polarized voting. You have to meet 4 different criteria in order to have this. And that's something that you need legal expertise for. But she said that her team would have the ability to go back and do that later in the year, like next year in early 2021, if we need to. But I'm anticipating that because there's been so much growth in the Hispanic and Latino communities that those 2 districts probably need to go to a Hispanic and Latino candidate, which means they need to be try to draw districts that maximize their voice basically. And protect those communities of interest.
A strategy question. So we all know how zip code 76104 is notorious for how terrible healthcare is, and it's just very, no representation. Is the best way to deal with that to divide it so you have at least 2 or 3 city councilmen that have to, or council people that have to work together to find a solution, rather than have it just be one city council person? What is the best way to improve representation?
That goes back to the Voting Rights Act, but that was specifically so that community. So back when they passed the Voting Rights Act, they specifically wrote it the way that they did to help certain communities be able to come together to elect a candidate of their choice. And in order to do that, you have to have these certain percentages of minorities in that district. Because before we had at-large systems, and it made it impossible for a minority group to come together and elect a candidate of their choice. And so that's why when you look at some of these really odd districts, like the one that Byrick showed that had, it's BC's district. And when I look at it, I feel the same. I'm like appalled. I'm like, that looks awful. Because what is like someone in the middle of Fort Worth going to have in common with someone in the middle of Dallas, right? They're completely different cities. I don't know, maybe a lot. I don't know. I don't live there. Yeah. But the reason that they drew it that way is because they had to get that citizen voting age population specifically for the community that they were trying to help. They had to get that up to a certain percentage point. And so that was why that district was drawn that way. And so I don't know, I guess Mark BC has done a good job of representing that community, although it does say like, look, they've split these 2 cities up completely. Yeah. So.
I mean, the trade-off is how dense should that district be? How do you balance turnout, minority turnout versus minority residents? And I will say, going back to my point about self-packing, I told you that there was a citizen plan that was turned in by Stop 6. Well, the Stop 6 plan had 3 minority opportunity districts instead of the 4 that the staff came up with. Basically, the people who drew that, the Stop 6 people drew fewer districts for minorities than the staff was trying to draw. The staff basically tried to create 4 minority opportunity districts. And you can argue that Ann Zeta's, could have been an opportunity district. She certainly represents her district. There was just a kind of a back and forth between the plans that the United Hispanic Council put in and the staff plan. The United Hispanic Council was pushing for 60% minority, and the staff plan, because of the trade-offs, it was closer to above 50%, but not quite to the 60% level.
Yeah, an important question was what percentage of people in the district were going to vote.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to assign strict percentages that would be the same for all groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's something that legal counsel determine, like voting rights attorneys look at, and that goes into, there's this whole field of math and political science that goes with that people like us, like it takes someone with like a PhD to look at that stuff, and that's why they are who they are. Anyways, there's a whole
set of criteria.
Yeah, but the census doesn't identify whether someone's voted or not, right? It's just the total number of people. But everything I see is on voters.
They have access to election history. Mm-hmm. And so even at the state level, you can tell who's determined or who's voted in the primary. That's public knowledge, you have access to that basically. Like if I wanted to go and buy that data today, I could, and the state would sell it to me. And so you can tell who's voted in the primaries. So that way you can see who's a Democrat, who's a Republican. And then if you buy enough years, you can see who's reliably voted in the Democratic primary and the Republican primary and what that voter turnout is like. And that voter turnout data is also available by the state legislative council. And mapping consultants have access to that. So I think another thing that we need to be pushing on is we want them to make public. I know that attorney-client privilege is protected and we can't ask for that, but we should be asking for, if you hire a consultant, we would like to know who the consultant is. If you hire legal counsel, we'd like to know who that is, because we can vet that. Also, what data specifically, we want to know what data the mapping consultant is going to be using, because they have to hire a mapping consultant to make these maps. They can't use a program like Maptitude or something. Well, they could, but they need a mapping consultant basically to do it.
Mhm. So
Yeah, maybe they've already done that.
mhm.
Maybe they
We
already
should go
have-
back.
Since they've chosen the
Tracy-
software, maybe they've already got a mapping consultant in mind. We could
Tracy
find that out.
showed me how to search the city council records. And so that was what I had planned to do, because Allison Riggs was like, I need to know about this criteria. It doesn't sound right, but I needed to find the records. And so we can search the records. There's not too many to look through. I think there's like, I don't know, maybe 70 or so, but I think with our team here, we can totally do that and see if they've already paid that mapping consultant, who they used for legal counsel last time, and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe you could send us, put together a list of questions.
Okay, so
That we could address.
we are up to speed now, so, and ready for next week's task force meeting, right?
When is that meeting? Is October 22nd, you said?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, same night as the debate, if it happens.
Oh, that sucks. That's gonna be hard to turn people out. for that.
It's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll, they should be done by 6:30 and you rush home and
Will
have
the
the-
public have an opportunity to speak then? And what's going to be talked about at that meeting? Like, what's the purpose of the redistricting portion of the meeting?
Well,
so,
that they've already stated a program, and they're going to bring people from Austin and San Antonio to explain the kind of methods they use there.
Will the public have an opportunity to speak at all?
I believe
Yeah.
so. Yeah, at every meeting.
But like after the redistricting segment, so you can do like a rebuttal type thing.
Well, it'll be after the meeting. They'll have a public comment. I see what you're saying. At the last meeting, they just had public comments at the end. In other words, you couldn't address particular items on the agenda. The citizens could just speak at the end.
But
Well-
are they actually responding to the things that you guys are saying? Or are they just sitting there staring at you like fish in a fish tank?
Well, I think something to keep in mind is that the task force itself, they're pretty independent. They raised all kinds of questions during their meeting that, for example, whether they should try to get interest in an independent commission. That wasn't on their agenda at all. They immediately started attacking some of the criteria when they were shown that list. Immediately, they didn't have to do that. And a number of them explained that they planned to be independent, that they weren't happy about the fact that the original suggestion of the Race and Culture Task Force was ignored. They just don't want to see the city continue to, create these task forces and then just put on the shelf what the recommendations are.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that we were referring to the task force, not city council. So I take back that comment.
oh,
Okay, yeah.
okay. I mean, clearly there are people on the city council who are for an independent redistricting commission. And Ann Zeta is probably the most vocally for it.
Yeah.
Carlos Flores is for it, but he doesn't have the courage to speak up.
He didn't commit to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but
The people who
Ann Zeta did commit to it.
Yeah. I think Carrie Moon is dead set against it. Brian Bird is against it. Probably Jungus Jordan. I'm not sure about Shingleton. And what was it? Mayor Price called the Austin plan a mess or a disaster or something like that.
Which it wasn't. And I was in the audience and I'm like, you son of a.
She used Trumpian language. Yeah.
I had something to say and I can't remember. It got me upset. Oh, the Race and Culture Task Force, that was my next question is, I know they had that list of demands or asks from City Council.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Independent Redistricting Commission got tossed to the side. Were there other ones though that have been implemented that you've seen progress on?
Yes. For example, the city hired a police monitor. The task force wanted more. They wanted a whole, a whole police commission, oversight commission. But at least they got a monitor and an assistant. The city created 2 people. Plus, they created this Department of Diversity, and they hired a diversity officer, Christina Brooks. And those are the 2 I'm most familiar with. But they've moved ahead. There were 22 recommendations, and I think they've moved ahead on several of them.
Can I comment on that, Bruce?
Of course.
So they did implement the police monitor's office. The assistant actually just left. Her last day was today.
Wow.
And I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that they did that community survey at the end of July going into August.
Yep.
And they only had $1,000 to do the survey, to do the analytics of the survey, and to do the report. So while they are there and in place, and Kim Neal is a highly intelligent, capable woman, they do not have the resources and the support they need to carry out their job, which is indicative of the way things are done here. So I just, if no one knew that is what's going on with that office. The
That's
assistant
useful.
just took another position somewhere else and has left the office.
Ah.
I've heard something similar about the other group that they set up for, I don't know, racial sensitivity. What's the other person?
Diversity, Christina Brooks.
She's from Pete Buttigieg's office, and I've heard that
That's
people
right. That's
try
right.
to meet with her, and she hasn't been very empathetic or responsive, or she's like, yeah, I'm just here for the next 6 months. I really don't care. And so when I hear stuff like that, it just really stresses me out, especially when you hear and see stories about the Fort Worth Star Telegram reporting about 76104. And that story is not really new. Tracy Scott said that, they knew that back 3 years ago. So my question is,
Christina Brooks met with Byrick and me for an hour and a half.
And I will say she was more focused on voter suppression. I mean, outright voter suppression than say reforming redistricting.
so the whole point of districts though is to give people a chance to get representation so they get their needs met in the community. And so if she doesn't understand that, then she doesn't understand the Voting Rights Act. And that's a super, again, it's not in my stomach.
I'm not so sure of that. She seemed pretty.
I know that
to me. Yeah.
These people might be nice and very well capable. It just sounds, and again, it's probably because I'm biased and I'm not sure if I really trust the mayor completely, but that's just what my take on all of this
She's
is.
directing this whole department.
Okay, I mean, it looks like you have a second from Alex.
Conclusions of her in 30 seconds. Yeah. She's
I've
done a tough job.
I can tell you that from minority community members that they do not feel that she is responsive to their thoughts or their needs, and is actually comes off as the type that's like, well, if someone's not going to reach out for it or go get it, it's not my job to go to them. That's the impression that they have made and said to me in regards to her. I haven't had a personal interaction, so I can't comment on that, but I can say that from a lot of minority community stakeholders, that's what I've been told by them.
That's too bad. Yeah.
So I think what we need to try to do, and it might be too late to do this for the October 22nd meeting, is to maybe have another meeting, but invite some of these stakeholders and try to get some legal counsel involved, or someone that can really help identify what type of testimony we need to start lining up to identify these communities that really truly need representation and that the city might just be ignoring right now. So all of the stuff that we just kind of outlined and what Tara just said can be used as evidence for future litigation. And that's kind of what we need to do. And we need to line that up to display to them, like, you really are ignoring these communities, and we have a right to draw districts where they can elect a candidate of their choice. That's what the Voting Rights Act says. Section 2 is still around. We need to have like a certain protection in place, basically. So that's what my recommendation was. We can easily put together that list of requirements, like ways to improve the process and the list of redistricting criteria. I think what they have looks pretty good. Did they have on there that, like, number 1 should be equal population. Number 2 should always be the Voting Rights Act. Did they say that on the criteria?
Yeah.
I think that was the order.
Yeah.
Okay, and so if that's there, they should have gotten rid of that one weird criteria. And I think maybe that can be like the only thing that I could give you what Allison Riggs sent me if you want to see for the independent. Yeah. This is for state legislation though, but I mean, you guys are welcome to use it too and apply it to city council if you guys want to do that. But this is what the coalition in North Carolina used for their state level legislation. But I'm happy to forward that to you as well.
And that was my question about, like, equal in size. Is that size, diameter, or size, square miles or square footage?
Population.
Or population. Well, it doesn't say specifically.
Yeah,
that's the intent. No, that's it's probably articulated better somewhere. But the other thing is, you might actually want to build in future growth in that and use your margin. That's why I think, why 5 plus or minus 5%? Because I thought there was a Supreme Court ruling that allowed you to go plus or minus 10.
I think
no, it's not plus or minus 10, it's 10% total. And so when they say plus or minus 5, that means that 10.
I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I can send you the criteria that coalition in North Carolina put together if you want to.
We can share it with everyone.
But I think number 1, we need to find out when the next task force meeting is for city council, so we can try to figure out how many groups we can get together.
It's October 22nd.
Well, after that, because I think that's too late.
Okay, there's a schedule.
Yeah, I think there might be one more in November, and then they don't meet again until either January or February.
Well, they have to get their preliminary report in December. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
After that, though, I think we need to look at what the exact timeline is that they've laid out for the redistricting process, so we figure out how much time we have. If that census data comes in and we have 6 months, then we'll have time to play around with it and then try to reach out to community groups. I think also that we need to really pressure them for them to hold public input hearings, not for us to go out and do the work.
No, they're committed to soliciting citizen inputs again. That's going to happen again.
But how many did they hold last time, and in which parts of the city did they hold it? What now?
They had 4 public meetings for submitting the maps.
Did they hold them in different districts around the city though?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had a set of public meetings beforehand to train people, and then they had and then they got the inputs from the citizens, and they had a series of public meetings when they presented the interim integrated draft plan from the state.
But they actually went out and held public input hearings around the city, right?
All over the city, yeah.
Okay.
So that took time. I mean, I grant you, maybe they can do it in the space of 1 week, 1 or 2 weeks for each set of public hearings.
I know this is going to be down the line, but writing Stephanie's questioning about whether there was actually public input, based on how these most recent budget town hall meetings went, they had it to where people just submitted questions and they just answered them. But the only council member that actually had an interactive meeting, live meeting, where it was some good back and forth exchange was Ann Zeta's meeting. After that, there was no live exchange of information. And I really feel like we should push them to have that, because there's not a real back and forth equitable conversation. It's just a question, and then they give a glossed over, diluted, I call it mansplaining explanation, no offense, that doesn't really answer what the question being asked is, and it's extremely frustrating. So I think that if we're gonna go in on this, I feel like we should push them, go for it all the way.
I think we need to push them as well, because they didn't adopt to the Independent Redistricting Commission. They need to issue a report at the end to explain why they drew the lines the way that they did. Again, and that's for legal purposes, not only so people can learn what their thinking was and we can kind of try to push them and hold them accountable, but also that can be used for litigation purposes in the future if they do end up violating the Voting Rights Act.
So are you focusing on why they drew the last set of lines 10 years ago?
No. So when you look at an Independent Redistricting Commission, that's always the last part of legislation, is the commission issues a report for why they drew the lines the way they did, especially if they cut precincts in half, because when they cut precincts, if you go below the precinct level, what they're using at that point is racial data.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that could very well indicate that there was racial intent or racial gerrymandering going on.
I think it will be interesting to see if the task force gets behind the IRC idea just on their own. We really don't know that. That was really unexpected.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, on that point, I think that just us showing up and making public comments is going to make it into their report. Just part of their report will probably say, here's what we studied, here's what we recommend, we heard these inputs from the community, and here's what the community was behind. If they keep getting the message, hey, we want IRC, or we want explanation for the district, how district boundaries were drawn, or we want more transparency, we want this. That's just by us coming before the task force, it's more likely to make it into their report. And as maybe part of the recommendation, that's the strategy that we're trying to forward here.
Wouldn't it be interesting if there was a way to do a mock independent redistricting commission? And I realize that would take a lot of resources and all, but just a thought.
Good funding for it.
Yeah, no, I know what I was thinking about. Maybe if it was a theater department at TCU where they wanted to dramatize everything and get somebody that looks like Nixon to do the rogue politician and so forth. But I know that's a wayward thing, but it sprang to mind just now. So
I asked Dana, so do you think that if you brought all these people who drew these maps, if you brought them into a room as if they were an independent redistricting commission, do you think it would be contentious, or do you think it would be collegial? And she said, interesting question. She thought that it would be genuinely collegial, that people would be cooperative and that it would not be so contentious, and that they would understand one another's issues.
So that's what I was going to say, that the Austin Independent Redistricting Commission actually did an outstanding job. And so Mayor Price's comments at that one city council meeting were way out of line. All of the commissioners, from what I have seen, have had the utmost respect for one another. Importantly, though, they drew majority and minority districts first with the helps of voting rights attorneys and voting rights groups. that live there in the community. And the 4 districts that they drew here in Austin are still holding till still strong today. And so the overall process was just very successful. Not only that, but they weren't sued. And that's like very rare when it comes to redistricting.
We actually had communication with Costello, this fellow TJ Costello. Maybe you know him, Steph.
I just gave a presentation with him last week, I think it was.
Yeah. And
the week before.
he gave us very positive report. And
Yeah.
there was also a fellow named Jason Alexander, an assistant city manager, and he also was very enthusiastic about it.
I could connect you with some of the other commissioners as well. If you,
Sure.
I don't know if you ever need anything like that though.
Well, does anybody have anything else to add?
Oh, go ahead, Janet.
Well, I was just gonna mention that I'm with the League of Women Voters, just like Stephanie. So I was thinking that maybe it would be good because some of the members of the League of Women Voters of Tarrant County aren't aware of this effort. So it may be good to have a presentation. In fact, I was thinking to have Stephanie on to talk about the state, because we need to get that legislation advocated to our legislatures pretty soon.
Mhm.
But also they need to know about the city stuff. So I'll bring it up to our VP for programs to have that
Okay.
added to an agenda in the
Yeah.
future.
We had spoken with Nancy Stevens before,
Mhm.
but nothing ever came of it. So I hope you succeed. Yeah,
I've got a little bit of pull in there now,
good.
Okay.
whether they like it or not.
So does anybody think that they'll be able to support the October 22nd meeting next week, whether it's on WebEx or in person?
I thought I might describe what it's like to go to the meeting.
Okay.
They have the meetings in the city work session room, the council work session room. And we sit in the audience, which has been reconfigured to individual seats about 6 feet apart. So it felt pretty safe. We
They
all
don't have a
wore
virtual
masks.
testimony.
Yeah. They said it was their safest room.
They don't
And-
have the ability for virtual testimony.
And you can also, if you register in advance, you can make your presentation virtually. Yeah.
And I can show, like last time, I can show my slides. I provide that to the city secretary and then she puts my slides up.
Right. And they'll pass out any documents we give them.
I think what we should do is create that list of demands, because that's very simple and straightforward based on what an independent redistricting commission is asking of people.
Mhm.
And that was laid out also by, it's in the league's national platform. And this was based on basically work from the California Independent Redistricting Commission, which is still bar none, like one of the most transparent and processes. And they also do an outstanding job of including the public as much as possible. So I think we should get that list together and have folks read it off. There's also the Fair and Open campaign that the Fair Maps Texas Coalition put together. And that was based on problems that we saw in 2011 round of redistricting that was called out by a federal court. And so we based that list of criteria, like we want a public input hearing after the maps were drawn, but before they pass out of committee, because it's a legislator. But we want them to slow down that timeline and give the public a chance to comment on all of this. And so we created that Fair and Open campaign though, but we drove a lot of public participation in the public input hearings that way, because people were just pissed about how closed door the process was last time. And so if you give people those points, they're like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. People can show up and echo those points at the hearing. And that's something that you can easily distribute and have people come in and read and put into their own words. And so those were my recommendations, but I can email that out to you guys and you can do what you want with it.
Well, I'll just say, working with United Fort Worth myself and all the times that we go down there and yell at them with lists, they're effective. They do listen. So, you know, and that's even with like legal issues. They did respond to the last list that we made in June in regards to the protesters on the West 7th Bridge. And we demanded all charges be dropped, and they were dropped. Our list was met. Our demands were met. For the most part, I think there might be one or two in there that might still be free floating, but Stephanie's right. They do, you know, here they've responded to lists really well, and it's easy to get buy-in from people who normally would feel intimidated about going down there and speaking publicly. So, yeah.
So it sounds like we have a start.
Yeah, and I'm willing to Zoom in or WebEx in next Thursday. I'll be at work. If I can, if I'm not busy enough, I don't have any problem speaking. It wouldn't be the first time that I've chimed into a meeting and spoke while at work. And I don't have a problem showing up when I'm available at the meetings. But with that being said, I do feel like I have to disclose to the group, and you guys can let me know whether it would be a conflict of interest for me to continue here, because I'm very interested in this. I've been interested in, I think I talked to Kent like back in April about this, like, hey, what's going on with the district? But I am going to, I would say by the end of the month, it should be an official announcement, but I am running for city council of District 4. So I don't know if that, thank you. I don't know if that, if that puts a like conflict of interest in place or not to be running. And then after, if I won or not. So I would let you guys tell me if it is, and I would, gladly step away if it does. But this is definitely interest, a thing that is at the very forefront of my focus right now, and amongst a lot of other people too that we've been talking about it. And so,
have you already declared? Did you already declare that you're running?
I'm officially announcing at the end of the month. Everything is getting put in place.
End of the month. So would that be after October 22nd?
Yes. After,
okay. So,
the week before the week before general election.
Yeah. So probably you're good for October 22nd.
I don't actually see a problem as long as you don't come in and advocate for lines to be drawn a certain way. As long as you stick to, I want a fair and open process, then I don't see any problem with it, to be honest with you.
That's really my biggest emphasis, is the fair and open process. The fair and that's really one of my biggest platform points, is we need to create transparency in the city processes, the way that things are done, all these shut doors and all this back and forth frustrating stuff that they make us go through. Like it has to stop. And so I'm only interested in open and fair, and I don't have any problem speaking on it like next year during campaign time, because again, like I said, the budget town hall meetings were not open. They were not interactive. They didn't answer questions. And I had a one-on-one meeting with Carrie, who's the councilman for District 4 now.
Right.
We didn't even have a budget town hall meeting because he said he didn't think people were going to show up, and he didn't want to waste city staff time.
Right.
I mean, like, so those are the types of things that really chap my hide. It's really not that hard to show up and do your job minimally. You're just not showing up at all. And so, that's, like Stephanie said, all I care about is creating an open, fair process for everybody on all city issues, so that everyone in the city has some equity, in place, so that their voices are heard.
Well, maybe you can speak to that on October 22nd. But you only have 3 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm used to getting a lot of information in the 3 minutes. I'm used to my mic getting cut off, actually, but yeah.
So it sounds like you already have a plan. Yeah, sounds great.
So then after this meeting, Bruce, are you saying that then I should probably not speak publicly after I announce?
I really don't know. We should probably talk to an attorney or just try to get some clarity. But
citizen, she can do whatever she wants.
Yeah. So. But in the meantime, it doesn't sound like there could be any problem for October 22nd. Yeah.
Oh, Byrick's saying something.
You're muted.
Tara, I would,
Stephanie has a point. Until you're elected, there's no conflict.
right. And I would seize the moment to speak to the issues, because it's not like you're opportunizing, since that's already the basis of your run. It's like you're just speaking to your passion about the process. So, and one other thing I got to tell y'all, this is absolutely one of the best meetings I've ever listened in on. Yeah, I know y'all don't believe that, but if y'all knew how many nights I spent on Hemphill Street watching, I won't belabor it, but suffice it to say, I'm very acquainted with Fort Worth politics, and I'm just tickled as can be to see all this energy and intellect coming to the table. And I honestly think we're fixing to accomplish some big things. So I'll leave it at that and just tip my hat to everybody on the call.
Thank you.
I can tell you guys, it seems to be like I'm one of the younger persons in the room, but I can tell you guys that in Fort Worth right now, and I promise you that there are a lot of young adults that are extremely engaged right now, especially with this issue and a lot of other issues, and they're going to be flooding forward here really soon. So I'm going to go back to them from this meeting tonight and be like, y'all got to come, y'all got to show your faces,
Great.
and get them involved too. And they're from all different parts of the city too. So.
Okay.
That's good.
Tara, that you can serve as a bridge for a huge change, because the bridge that has not been connected has been how police reform, you see all the protests, but you don't see the tangible action related to reform a political process, and what you were saying about the closed doors downtown. So if you can serve as that bridge, that will be a tremendous, tremendous thing.
I could only be so privileged, Jeff. I could only be so privileged to be able to do that.
Bruce, will you send us a link or information about the meeting?
Sure, Janet. Be glad to.
So I can put out a newsletter to my email, because Fair Maps Texas email list when we send out the next newsletter, and include a link for the city council. And I can even supply the talking points for people to echo. Also, we have the Poor People's Campaign email list for Tarrant County. I think we have 1,000 people on it, so we might be able to find some extra people to show up and support. I can always grab Wanda McKinney though and say, Wanda, do me a favor and show up. She's there in, close to 76104, so she might be able to show up for support as well. But I think maybe that's one of the things that we need to definitely like line up, because it's one thing for us to like talk about it, but it's another thing to like actually get people's names down on a list and, you know, start emailing them and sending them reminders and stuff like that. Did you guys reach out to Chris Savage yet? Chris might be another, I don't know too many people in Fort Worth. I know she does Indivisible Fort Worth, along with, who is that representative that was actually behind the racial gerrymandering HC90? Lon Burnham's group up there.
I sent Lon an invitation, the same one you all got, and I don't think I heard back from him. I saw him last Saturday at the post office protest. Yeah.
Probably good that he's not here then. I'll stick with the Fair Maps list, and I'll stick also with the Poor People's Campaign list. And then there's also people like Pastor Kiev Tatum on the South Side that we need to definitely include in this process.
Who was that?
Kiev Tatum, Pastor.
Yes, he's already aware of us.
Did you talk to him about providing testimony?
No, not for October 22nd.
Just somewhere in the line, along the lines, we need to get groups like his involved, because that's going to demonstrate that there's a community of interest there that we want to protect.
Fernando Flores has been in touch with him.
I'm connected to some of the same groups that Kaiv is, and I can also drop this into their lap and into their sphere of view and see what how much involvement that I can get from them as well.
Great.
Tracy also said that and she connected me with another person that is involved with healthcare in that community because the county has an $800 million bond and they're trying to figure out where to put clinics around the city. And so she connected me with someone else and I'll have to go back and look, but I was thinking, I'm supposed to be talking about healthcare, but I might as well give a plug for redistricting too. So I was gonna go back to that person and see if they could show up. But that's what we wanna do is start identifying people that form that community of interest and areas of town that we know we wanna protect. And that's pretty simple. Like that map from the University of Texas outlines the areas that we need to be focused on, the life expectancy map. Because we know that those communities aren't getting either access to food, healthcare, transportation, education, one of those problems, and that can be addressed by better representation with city council.
It's true.
I mean, I don't know if it'll help, but I have a very, very good friend that's on the JPS board of directors. Amanda, I could, she's passionate about a lot of things like this. We're both Latina, so we really believe in minority representation, obviously. So I can just reach out to her and see if she's anywhere on this issue or she knows anything about it. See where we can get from there as well.
Their healthcare district, because I know there's different healthcare districts. That's one area that would be good. But this is like further down the line when we do the public input hearings and stuff like that for the districts that they do end up drawing.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just kind of a nerd for that kind of planning. Like it gets my juices flowing. I just love it. I live for it. So
Well, so we've got a lot on our plate. And does anybody else want to add anything? So Stephanie, if you send me that material, then we can share it with everybody that's here.
No problem. I'll sit down tomorrow because I need to also send some of that info to Allison Riggs. So I'll sit down and I can definitely give you the the standard recommendations because I've sent it to other cities as well. So I can definitely just forward that email along to you tomorrow, but I'll take a more closer look to make sure that everything is included that we talked about tonight as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
And Bruce, do you have this recording on your website?
No, I did not record it.
It says it's recording.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. I didn't do anything. So,
Oh,
no, the only thing I did was to save the chat.
Well,
You know that
still recording.
okay. Now you got to go find the recording.
It sounds like I've got a hunt mission coming up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll put that on our YouTube channel.
Sounds good.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so we
All right.
good? Good night, y'all.
Good
Yeah.
All right.
night.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Good night.